The history of Iceland. Iceland's history is deeply rooted in exploration, settlement, and resilience. The story begins in the 7th or 8th century when Celtic monks are believed to have been the first humans to set foot on the island. These monks, known as Paper, sailed to Iceland in search of solitude and religious devotion. However, they didn't stay long, and there is little evidence of permanent settlement. By the middle of the 9th century, Norse Vikings began to venture further westward. They often sailed between Norway, Shetland, and the Faroe Islands, expanding their influence. Some of these explorers drifted off course and arrived in Iceland. The first permanent settlement in Iceland is traditionally dated to 874, when Ingolfur Arnarsson, a Norwegian chieftain, established his homestead in Reykjavik. He is considered the first permanent settler, marking the beginning of the Viking Age in Iceland. Exploration and naming of Iceland. While Ingolfur is credited with founding the first settlement, other explorers, such as Floki Vilhjálmsson, played a role in the early exploration of Iceland. Floki is known for giving Iceland its name. According to the Icelandic sagas, he sailed to the island and, upon seeing a fjord filled with ice, named it Island or Iceland. This name stuck, although much of the country is not covered in ice, especially in the southern lowlands. The settlement era. The settlement of Iceland accelerated over the next few decades as more Norse families and chieftains arrived from Scandinavia. These settlers brought with them their families, slaves, and livestock, establishing farms throughout the fertile coastal areas. The settlers came primarily from Norway, driven by political strife and conflicts with the ruling kings, as well as a desire for more land. By 930, the settlers had formed a unique political structure known as the Althing, Alþingi, the world's oldest surviving parliament. The Althing was a legislative and judicial assembly where chieftains, known as Gore, met annually at Ingvellir, a site of great historical significance in Iceland. Here, laws were recited and disputes were resolved. The laws were not written down at first, but were memorized by the law speaker, a respected figure who served as the legal authority of the assembly. This marked the establishment of the Icelandic Commonwealth, a period of independence and self-governance. Christianization of Iceland. The early settlers of Iceland were staunch pagans, worshipping the Old Norse gods like Odin, Thor, and Freyr. However, in the year 1000, Iceland faced pressure from both Norway and Denmark to convert to Christianity. After much debate and to avoid a civil war, the Althing made a peaceful decision to adopt Christianity as the official religion. The conversion was gradual, and many Icelanders continued to privately practice their old beliefs for some time. The shift to Christianity paved the way for Iceland's integration into the broader European cultural sphere. The Viking Age and expansion. During the Viking Age, Icelanders were not only focused on settling their land, but also ventured further afield. One of the most famous Icelandic explorers was Eric the Red, who was exiled from both Norway and Iceland due to his violent temper and involvement in killings. He sailed westward and established the first Norse settlement in Greenland around 985. His son, Leif Erikson, became even more famous for his voyage to North America, likely around the year 1000. He reached a place he called Vinland, which historians believe is located in modern-day Newfoundland, Canada. This makes Leif Erikson the first known European to set foot in North America, centuries before Christopher Columbus. The decline of the Icelandic Commonwealth. The Icelandic Commonwealth era, though initially peaceful, eventually gave way to internal strife. By the late 12th and early 13th centuries, Iceland's political system began to weaken due to power struggles among the chieftains. Wealthy and powerful families formed alliances, leading to a period known as the Age of the Sturlungs. Feuds between these families escalated into armed conflicts, culminating in civil war. This period of unrest weakened Iceland's independence, making it vulnerable to external influences. In 1262, Icelanders, weary of the ongoing violence, agreed to submit to the rule of the Norwegian king in a treaty known as the Old Covenant, Gamli-Satmali. This marked the end of the Icelandic Commonwealth and the beginning of Iceland's time under Norwegian rule. Over time, Iceland became increasingly integrated into the Norwegian kingdom, though it maintained a degree of autonomy. The Kalmar Union and Danish rule. In 1380, the crowns of Norway and Denmark were united under the Kalmar Union, which brought Iceland under Danish control. For the next several centuries, Iceland remained a distant and often neglected part of the Danish realm. The island endured numerous hardships during this period, including severe weather conditions, volcanic eruptions, and epidemics such as the Black Death, which wiped out a large portion of the population. One of the most devastating natural disasters occurred in 1783 when the Laki volcano erupted. The eruption released massive amounts of sulfuric gases into the atmosphere, leading to a global cooling effect and widespread crop failures. In Iceland, it caused famine and the death of approximately 9,000 people, about a quarter of the population at the time. The Reformation and trade monopoly. In the 16th century, the Protestant Reformation swept through Scandinavia, and Iceland was not immune to its influence. Iceland's Catholic population resisted the change, but in 1550, the last Catholic bishop, John Arason, was executed, and Lutheranism was imposed as the official religion. The Reformation marked the end of Catholicism in Iceland and the beginning of a long period of Danish trade monopolies that stifled Iceland's economy and contributed to widespread poverty. For centuries, Icelanders were forbidden from trading with any country other than Denmark. This trade monopoly, combined with recurring natural disasters and plagues, kept the island in a state of economic depression. The fight for independence. By the 19th century, ideas of nationalism and self-determination began to spread across Europe, reaching Iceland as well. Inspired by these movements, Icelandic leaders such as John Sigurðsson spearheaded the country's independence movement. The Danish crown gradually granted Iceland more autonomy, and in 1874, Iceland received its own constitution and control over internal affairs. World War I had a profound impact on Iceland, as Denmark's grip on the island weakened. In 1918, Iceland was recognized as a fully sovereign state under the Danish-Icelandic Act of Union, but the two nations remained linked through a personal union with the Danish monarch serving as the head of state. Iceland remained neutral during World War I and managed to avoid the worst of the conflict. World War II and full independence. During World War II, Iceland's strategic location in the North Atlantic made it a key interest for both the Allies and Axis powers. In 1940, after Denmark was occupied by Nazi Germany, British forces preemptively occupied Iceland to prevent a German invasion. Icelanders were initially unhappy with the occupation, but it ultimately helped protect the country from Axis control. In 1941, the United States took over the occupation from Britain, further securing Iceland's defense. In 1944, while Denmark was still under German occupation, Iceland seized the opportunity to declare full independence. A national referendum overwhelmingly supported the establishment of the Republic of Iceland, and on June 17, 1944, Iceland formally severed its remaining ties with Denmark, becoming a fully independent nation. Post-war growth and the Cod Wars. In the post-war era, Iceland experienced rapid modernization and economic growth, aided by the Marshall Plan and a surge in foreign investments. In 1949, Iceland became a founding member of NATO, though it pledged to remain non-offensive. The country also entered into several Cod Wars with the United Kingdom from the 1950s to the 1970s. These were a series of confrontations over fishing rights in the North Atlantic. Iceland extended its fishing limits, which led to increased tensions, but eventually, the country prevailed, securing control over its valuable fishing waters. Modern Iceland. Iceland's economy continued to grow throughout the 20th century, expanding from fishing to other industries such as energy, tourism, biotechnology, and finance. However, the global financial crisis of 2008 hit Iceland particularly hard. The collapse of its banking system led to severe economic hardships and forced the country to take significant loans from international sources to stabilize its economy. Since then, Iceland has recovered and is now one of the world's most developed nations. Its economy is bolstered by tourism, which surged in the early 21st century, attracting millions of visitors drawn to its stunning natural landscapes, geothermal hot springs, and unique culture. Iceland's population today is around 330,000, and it continues to play a prominent role in international diplomacy, sustainability, and environmental protection.